Hello, I'm David Bianco. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me. So today I'm going to be looking at a couple of comparisons of some mobile fidelity pressings to the originals that I have. Because we really have been spending a lot of time talking about these audiophile versions and then going into the issue of how they've been made and whether it's digital or analog. But at the end of the day, I think we all know it's about the sound. So I wondered to myself, gee, are these originals really so bad, or what are they really like when you really do a tight comparison of the two? That's what I'm going to be sharing with you next here at the Sound of Safe and Sound, Texas. So today it's going to be about two comparisons I'm going to be making. So the album involved first here is the Cars self-titled album, okay? And I've got the Mobile Fidelity original master recording, which is one that they now say did come direct from analog tape to get cut. And then I have one that is what was at the time a half-speed mastered audiophile record from Nautilus recordings back in the 80s, which were very good as well. They were a competitor to Mobile Fidelity slash MFSL, it was called at the time. So for me, this was always my go-to, the Nautilus. I have an OG of it as well. And so I compared the OG and the Nautilus, and basically what I found is the dynamics of the original were very good, but the Nautilus definitely was a bit more dynamic, had a little better high end and a little better low end, and the vinyl, of course, was quieter because on here it even says manufactured at Teldec Vinyl KM Records in Burbank, California. Back in the day, this was $17.50 versus the standard OG that you would buy would be maybe $7 at the time. So, 2.5 times the price at the time, which, is decent money back in those days, of course. So now when I compare that then and I say, okay, the Nautilus definitely beats the OG, but the OG sounds pretty good, but the vinyl is obviously noisier than this. So then procuring the Cars self-titled from Mobile Fidelity, which again is supposed to be straight analog to the cut here to the disc, I compare the two. And going back to back on these, immediately I get the sense that the Mobile Fidelity is obviously quiet, the vinyl's quiet, and the sound is clear and clean, but it is not as dynamic. And the bottom end is really where I think it was lacking, because some of these songs definitely have a steady punch beat kind of that you have in these electro techno kind of bands that were in the 80s. They had a lot of songs on here that you would recognize: Let the Good Times Roll, Good Times Roll, My Best Friend's Girlfriend, Just What I Needed, You're All I've Got Tonight, Bye Bye Love, and Moving in Stereo. So I mean, songs that I think at least you've heard one or two of those, I'm sure. And so they definitely did not, in the case of the Mobile Fidelity, have really near the dynamic range or the real clear separation of instrumentation. Some of the instruments were actually a bit buried, I think, in the sense that there were certain kind of chords that were being done on the synthesizer that I recognize very much in my memory. And when that came to that part of the song, it was like, where's it at? It was kind of muffled. And really, that really changes your listening experience, because you're almost listening for it. You're almost expecting it. And it wasn't quite there at all. So, for me, and I don't know if it's the Gain 2 system that was used for this or what might have been involved in terms of why it sounded the way it did, but it definitely didn't yield even the dynamics of the original, of the one you could pick up for $10 or $15 today as a used record. Albeit, again, it was much quieter and is much quieter. So it was a little bit disappointing. I really felt like this was going to be one that would be on par with this, given technology being better and the effort that was made. But I really, pull one out of the shelf to play, it's going to be the Nautilus. It's going to continue to be the Nautilus. So all I can say is that's my impression. That's what I found. I'm not going to say it sounds bad, but again, when you don't have anything to compare it to, it sounds pretty good. But for me, having these originals to compare it to, I was able to determine, was it worth the extra cost for it and get, the value out of it. And for me, probably not in this case with the cars. I do have one other caveat to note when purchasing from MoFi, and I assume from Music Direct, and that has to do with packaging. So when I open this, you open it this way, and the records are in there. And what you notice is you see the way these fold outs are, you know, if they're just left to their own, they're popped out some, and that's because it's a very, very snug fit. And so when this is folded down and pressed in tighter, and then it is put into its total package, and then it is sealed and secured, it actually is putting a lot of pressure then on those records, and that is what causes the seam splits. These had some very strong seam splits in them when they arrived. Now, one thing you can ask MoFi to do in special instructions, you can say, go ahead, open it up, take the record out, and take it out of the cover and put it on the outside or between the gatefold, if it's a gatefold, so that it doesn't have that pressure. And that can help. But again, if they would have used packaging that was not quite as snug, I don't think they would have had the seam split. So that's a common complaint is seam splits. It has to go from RTI to MoFi. So if it comes to them that way, then obviously it's a problem and it's too late. But many people now have been getting it separated in the shipment where they open it up and take the record out and they don't have the problem. Of course, if you want to keep something sealed, that's a problem. So just a warning to you to let you know that, we've seen that happening. And in this case, I could very demonstrably see that the packing was tighter and it caused that to happen. So again, buyer beware. So let's move on to my second comparison. And that is of hall&oates, Rock and Soul Part 1. So it's a greatest hits. This says original master recording from MoFi. They have not indicated anything on their website about this album from the standpoint of provenance. So we don't know what the mastering chain is on it at this point. So my task here was to compare this to the OG, to the original. So what's interesting about this OG is it's a little bit special in my mind at least, and that is it's a Robert Ludwig mastered record done at master disc. So as any of you may know, Robert Ludwig does really great work when he does the mastering, and master disc is one of those places where they did really fabulous pressings back in the 80s and the 90s, and when they were doing them, of course. And I really have always felt like this album sounded magnificent. I think one thing I ought to mention is usually on compilations, greatest hits, they throw it together. It's a moneymaker. To see a Robert Ludwig type being commissioned to do a greatest hits album is kind of a little shocking to me, even just given the fact that these are often by labels just a way to scoop up, the people who don't have individual albums but like the singles that had come out. And so usually not a lot of effort is necessarily put. A lot of times they'll put on, maybe the edited cut of something and not the LP cut. It's a mixed bag. But my point is to see Robert Ludwig doing this at master disc. So ever since the day I've had this one, I've thought, gee, it sounds really great because I have some of the original albums that some of these songs are on. And I think it really actually sounded a little better on this one, which is usually the opposite. Usually they sound the best on the original albums, and then on compilations they're compromised a bit. So how did this go? Well, this one wasn't even close. I mean, the mobile fidelity sounded clean. sounded clear. It was crisp, but again, bottom, like, I can't go for that. And that beat that you have, you didn't really feel it very much in this particular pressing. And, I don't know, again, this is another Gain 2 record that they use that ultra analog process. I don't know. I'm not here to speak to what may be the reasoning. We don't know what its source was. But I can tell you what, I would look for the RL Master Disc version of this album if you want it. Even if it's 20, 25 bucks used, if it's in good condition, VG Plus or better, then it's, you're probably going to enjoy the heck out of it. It really is a stunning pressing for being a greatest hits album. So this one proved again the point that costing more doesn't necessarily get you a better outcome. Again, there's nothing wrong with the pressing from MOFI. It sounds decent, sounds clean. The vinyl is quiet. Vinyl's a little quieter than the OG, of course, but by and large, really, when you come down to the way it sounds, the vocals, the separation, the spatiality of it, the distinctness of the actual instruments and voices, it's not even close. So if you're wanting to get like a hall&oates greatest hits, I would search out that RL, handwritten RL in the dead wax with the master disc stamp, because it is really the copy that has a really great sound. And again, to spend 40 bucks for the MOFI, I think is not money as well spent when something like the RL copy is available out there. So those are the kind of the results I found. In both cases, I found that really the MOFI really wasn't up to the originals, and that's just what I heard. I'm open to others finding otherwise. Again, if you listen to those albums independently without comparison, I could see why one would say they've sounded very good. They do sound very good in and of themselves. But I think, as we know, when you do have a basis for comparison, and that is what you end up doing when it comes down to spending that extra money, this is kind of a reflection of what I found. Now, for any of you who might feel, this was some piling on to MOFI or any effort like that, let me be clear about a couple things. We know what's going on with MOFI. We know there's a second lawsuit that's out there right now and the situation that they're in. I do think that all of this has just caused somewhat of a need for reflection, and this is part of that reflection, at least for me. There are a lot of mobile fidelities that are my go-to copies that I like very, very much. I have been focusing a little more on their later pressings that I have gotten, the ones that may have come from digital and or may have gone through Gain 2, and what I'm experiencing. And then looking back at, if I have or if I can get a copy of an original. Because the idea here, of course, is to get a better sounding record. You're paying more money. That really is the bottom line. Not to say, well, I've got a MOFI record versus whatever. I don't think that really gets you much. And certainly today, with what's going on, it probably gets you less. So my attempt here was really to do a comparison so that some of you don't have to maybe try to do that comparison, or to make an intelligent purchase, to look for maybe an original on these versus the other. One comment that I have noticed lately, I've been in a few stores over the past few weeks, talked to some of the owners and proprietors, and noticed, because when I go into a record store, I usually go through the first arrivals, the new arrivals that come in, I go through those first. And when I do that, usually, whatever's come is there. And I've noticed, I said, gee, wow, I see a few common albums that I've seen often, and I go, wow, that seems like a lot more for that record than I remember, and the guy will say, well, yeah. So, people are starting to realize that some of these analog original versions of these albums are really the ones to have, or the only ones that really ended up being true analog. And people are starting to reflect on that. And so they're willing to pay more for those records. And some of them said, they noticed that, in the past month, some of their product that's used has been getting gobbled up that's in their regular racks. And so maybe an album they were selling for $12 or $15. Now it's $20, $25 when a new one's coming in. And so that's a pattern that I've noticed. I talked to some folks here in Dallas area and down in San Antonio when I was there this past weekend. So, things in the music business, it kind of shakes a bit, and it has people that are finding out about things, even if they're not audiophile people themselves. What they're hearing is, boy, the best sounding ones are maybe some of these originals. And again, in this case, in my case, for the two I've compared, I'd say that really is undoubtedly the case. So it is a situation that one has to evaluate where they want to spend their money and where they want to get their best value. And I hope that those are the kind of things that I can bring you. I know it's been a lot of MOFI drama, and there's more to come, I guarantee you, based on this latest lawsuit that is well written, very detailed, and wow, it's something that really tells the story. If you get a chance to look at it, I'll put a link in the description about it. So for now, as always, I say thanks for watching. If you would subscribe, that helps me out. I would appreciate it. Press the notification bell and subscribe. If you like the video, indicate that with a thumbs up, and commenting is always welcome. So again, as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon again on the sound of Savetown, Texas. Take care, everybody.